The evening sky hung heavy with clouds as Aaron walked down the quiet street toward the small house at the edge of town. The porch light flickered weakly like it wasn't sure if it wanted to stay on. He hesitated at the gate, his hand resting on the rusted latch. Inside, he knew she was waiting, or maybe not waiting at all. Maybe she was sitting by the window pretending not to care that he was coming. That was how she had been since the day they met. Guarded, proud, afraid of hope. Her name was Emily, and she had learned too early that promises rarely lasted. Aaron had met her at the small diner where she worked evenings. She was quiet, serving coffee with a tired smile, always polite but distant. Most men who tried talking to her gave up after a few days, leaving her to her silence. But Aaron was different. He came back again and again, not because he needed coffee, but because something in her eyes pulled at him, something fragile behind all the strength she showed. That first night when she spoke those words, her voice trembled but her eyes were sharp. "You'll leave like the rest," she said, her hand tightening around the edge of the table. "They all do." Aaron didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her. The air between them was heavy, filled with all the things she wasn't saying. The fear, the exhaustion, the memory of people walking away when she needed them most. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. "Not until you believe I won't." She had laughed then, a broken, bitter sound. But that night, when the diner closed and the rain began to fall, Aaron had stayed behind to help her close up. He didn't push, didn't talk much, just helped quietly, stacking chairs, wiping tables, and fixing the broken hinge on the door that had been squeaking for weeks. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't tell him to stop either. Days turned into weeks. He would come by the diner, sometimes with a newspaper, sometimes with a flower from the roadside. He never demanded her attention, never asked for more than she was ready to give. Slowly, she started talking, about her mother who had passed away, about her father who had left, about the man who promised forever and disappeared after taking everything she had built. Each story came out like a small storm, quiet but full of hurt. Aaron listened, never interrupting. Sometimes he would just nod. Other times, when her voice broke, he would slide a napkin across the table, pretending it was nothing. But she noticed how his hand would linger for a second, how he never looked at her with pity, only understanding. One cold evening, her car broke down on the road outside town. She stood by it in the freezing wind, frustrated and alone when his truck pulled up behind her. He stepped out without a word, his jacket already coming off. "You'll get sick," he said, draping it over her shoulders. She tried to protest, but he was already under the hood. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died again. He didn't curse or complain. He just smiled and said, "We'll figure it out. You and me." That night he drove her home. When they reached her house, she lingered by the door, holding his jacket close. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said softly. "Helping me, staying." Aaron smiled gently. "Maybe I don't have to, but I want to." Something in her eyes shifted then. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the first flicker of warmth she had let herself feel in a long time. Weeks later, when the snow began to fall, Aaron showed up with a box of groceries and an old space heater he had fixed up. She tried to refuse again, saying she didn't want to owe anyone anything. But he just said, "Then pay me back by letting me make you dinner sometime." That made her laugh for the first time in months, a real laugh that reached her eyes. Bit by bit, her walls began to crumble. She found herself waiting for his truck lights in the evening, listening for his footsteps on the porch. They would talk for hours sometimes about everything and nothing. He told her about his time working construction in the next town, about losing his brother in an accident, about how silence sometimes hurt more than words. One night during a power outage, they sat together in the dark with only candlelight between them. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside it felt warm. She looked at him, the flickering light reflecting in her eyes. "You don't get tired of trying?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, because I know what it's like when someone gives up too soon." Her gaze dropped then, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever believe someone will stay." Aaron leaned closer, his voice low but steady. "Then I'll keep showing you until you do." That night she didn't push him away. For the first time she let him hold her hand. And though she didn't say it, he could feel that something deep inside her had shifted. As the winter passed, she started to smile more, to talk about tomorrow instead of yesterday. The people in town noticed. The girl who once walked alone now had someone beside her. But even as she changed, there were nights when old memories haunted her. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, afraid that the morning would come and he'd be gone like all the others. Each time, Aaron stayed. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just kept showing up, fixing things, listening, staying quiet when she needed silence. Slowly, her fear began to fade. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the air smelled of rain, Emily looked at him across the porch. "I think," she said softly, "you're the first person who didn't walk away when I tried to push." Aaron smiled, his eyes gentle. "Maybe that's because I saw something worth staying for." For the first time, she didn't look away. There was still fear in her eyes, but there was also something new. Something like peace. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The quiet between them said everything. The wind rustled through the trees, and for once it didn't sound lonely. She stood beside him, and for the first time in years she let herself believe that maybe this time someone really meant it when they said they wouldn't leave. The months passed quietly, like soft pages turning in a book neither of them wanted to end. Spring came early that year, bringing new colors to the fields and the scent of rain in the air. Emily had started smiling more often. Not the polite kind she used to give strangers, but real smiles that reached her eyes. The diner had more life now, too. She talked with customers, laughed with the other waitresses, and sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would glance out the window toward the road where Aaron's truck usually appeared at sunset. Aaron still came by every evening, sometimes helping her close up the diner, sometimes bringing her home-cooked meals from his place. They didn't talk about love or promises. They didn't need to. Everything was said in the way they looked at each other, the way he brushed the hair from her face when she was tired, the way she waited at the door when he was late. But life never stays gentle for too long. One evening, as the sky grew dark and thunder rolled in the distance, Aaron showed up at her porch with a letter in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes serious. Emily froze when she saw it, because she had seen that look before, the look that came before someone said goodbye. "It's from the company I worked for last year," he said quietly. "They're rebuilding near the river after the flood. They need someone to oversee the work for a few months." Emily's heart tightened. "A few months?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Maybe 3, maybe 4. It's good money. I could fix up the house, pay off the truck loan, but I'd have to leave next week." Silence filled the space between them. Rain began to fall softly on the roof, the sound echoing her heartbeat. "So you'll leave," she whispered, her voice breaking just a little. Aaron took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I don't want to," he said, "but I need to, for us. I don't want to build something with you and always be one bad day away from losing it." She wanted to believe him. She really did. But her fear rose like an old ghost, whispering in her ear that everyone leaves. She turned away, staring out at the rain. "They all say that," she murmured. "They all leave and they all say they'll come back." Aaron reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "Then I'll be the one who proves it's true." That night he didn't stay long. They stood at the door for a while, neither speaking. Finally he said, "I'll write every week, and when I come back I'll bring you something from every town I pass." She didn't answer, but as he walked away, she stood in the doorway until his truck lights disappeared into the night. The next few weeks were hard. The diner felt quieter. She tried to focus on work, but every sound of a passing engine made her look up, hoping it was him. His letters came every few days. Short notes about the work, the weather, little stories about the people he met. Each one ended with the same words, "Still here. Still yours." At first she read them with doubt, but as the weeks turned into months the letters kept coming. Never late, never forgotten. He sent pictures, too, of half-built houses, of wide rivers, of a sunset over the hills. He always wrote something simple at the bottom, something that made her smile even on her worst days. One afternoon, as she was closing the diner, a man came in asking for coffee. He looked familiar, an old friend of Aaron's from town. "He's still out there working hard," the man said with a grin. "Says he's got someone back home worth coming back for." Her heart softened at those words. She didn't say anything, but that night when she got home, she took out all the letters and laid them on the table. There were dozens now, some smudged from his rough hands, some with tiny stains that looked like coffee drops. She traced the words with her fingers and realized she was smiling without trying. Summer came and the town changed again. The flowers bloomed, the days grew long, and the ache in her heart began to ease. She still missed him, but the fear that used to control her was slowly fading. She had learned to trust something she couldn't see yet, but she could feel it in every word he sent. Then one morning, as the sun rose over the fields, she woke to the sound of a truck pulling up outside. Her heart leapt, but she hesitated, afraid to believe it. She walked to the door, her hands trembling, and when she opened it, there he was, dusty, tired, smiling. He held out a small wooden box, carved by hand. "I made this on the road," he said softly. "It's for the letters you sent me back." Tears filled her eyes. "You kept them?" He smiled. "Everyone." She didn't say anything. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The world felt still in that moment. The wind rustled through the trees. The birds sang, and for the first time the ache of waiting was gone. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set. He told her stories about the people he'd met, the bridges he'd repaired, the nights he'd thought about home. She listened quietly, her hand resting in his. When he finished, she looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. "You came back," she said. He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "I told you I would." She laughed through her tears. "I didn't believe you." "I know," he said gently. "That's why I had to prove it." They sat there for a long time, saying nothing more. The air was warm, filled with the scent of summer grass and the hum of crickets. For the first time in years, Emily felt peace. She realized that sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or loud promises. It's about quiet consistency, the kind that doesn't fade when things get hard. A few days later, he started working in town, repairing roofs and fences. In the evenings, he would walk her home from the diner, sometimes carrying her apron, sometimes just her hand. The people in town would smile as they passed, whispering about how she'd finally let someone in. Months went by, and the seasons turned again. They fixed up her old house together, planting flowers in the front yard and painting the porch white. Each brushstroke felt like another piece of her heart being rebuilt. One evening, as they finished, Aaron leaned back against the railing and looked at her with a soft grin. "Remember what you said that first night?" he asked. She tilted her head. "About you leaving?" He nodded. "And what did I say?" "You said you wouldn't go until I believed you wouldn't," she whispered. He smiled. "Do you believe me now?" Emily looked at him for a long time. The man who had walked into her life with quiet patience had changed everything. She took a slow breath, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Yes," she said finally, "I believe you." He smiled. Not with pride, but with quiet relief, as if those words were the only thing he had been waiting for all along. The sky turned orange as the sun dipped below the hills. She leaned against his shoulder, and together they watched the world settle into calm. No grand words were spoken, no promises needed, just two hearts that had learned, after all the storms, that sometimes staying is the loudest promise a person can make. And that night, when she locked the door and turned off the light, she didn't check the window to see if he was still there. For the first time, she knew she didn't have to.